Our guest in this segment is Steve Pearson from the West Virginia Independent Observer, and a man who has single-handedly revived journalism in the Eastern Panhandle, it seems. Steve, good morning to you, buddy.
Well, that is, I don't know what to say to that kind of praise, but
it's a lot of praise.
Yeah, and well, coming from you, it is. But we've actually
thank you.
We have our print edition coming out later today, actually, for the spring, and really this marks our 5th anniversary. And I don't know if I told you the story, but when Harriet and I sort of rescued the paper about 5 years ago, after a few months, we were worried that we were going to run out of stories because this was the beginning of the pandemic and not a lot was happening. And then, for some things just exploded. And we started doing like the solar facilities and the ambulances over there in Jefferson County, and it's the Planning Commission, and it's just been. It seems like it's accelerating. But yes, I definitely, what I really enjoy about the job is when people come up to me and say, I read that and thank you, and they feel better informed, and hopefully it's a better discussion that we're having.
Oh, you do a great job covering the details and the information, and it's a great source of information, especially in Jefferson County.
Yeah, so we're at observerwv.com, and we've just started a weekly quick read newsletter too. We're monthly in the print and 24/7 online, but if you want it delivered right to your inbox, it's observerwv.news, and it's free.
I signed up for that. I get those.
Good.
Yeah, they're great.
Good.
And their journalism contribution is only one half, maybe less than one half of what they've done for the county. The old Opera House, what you and Harriet did for the old Opera House, to resurrect it and to make it that showpiece that it is today. You folks have done a lot in the short period of time.
And the most important thing is that we have a bar, because now I have a place to go afterwards.
It's all about priorities.
It is. And the Apollo as well has the serves.
That marquee looks wonderful, Bob.
I know.
It changes everything.
It does. You can actually see it.
Yeah.
Because it's tucked away there, and I think it will be a lot more visible now.
Steve, speaking of getting a drink, what's the latest in the bottling situation? Don't try these transitions at home, folks, by the way. I'm a paid professional.
It
is.
What's the latest on the bottling plant in Jefferson County?
Well, to everyone's great shock, Sidewinder has filed a lawsuit against the Planning Commission saying that the decision was improper, and they'd like relief and for the Planning Commission to essentially they're asking the Planning Commission to give them advice on how they can proceed, and so that will be up to the judge to decide whether it was the Planning Commission had the right to say no, this is not permissible under our zoning laws, or whether Sidewinder's position, which is they have a right to use the water for however they want to. So this will work its way out probably, I imagine, for several years and several hundreds of thousands of dollars in lawyer fees.
Who controls water rights? Is it the state?
Well, again, the way the statute is constructed, the waters belong to the state of West Virginia for the benefit, of all of its citizens. But the use for specific uses, when you overlay zoning, again on the land, zoning and mineral extraction, they're two sort of come at things from different directions. So it's really not a very well litigated or area of the law, because in areas where we have mining, you don't have zoning. In areas where we have zoning, like here in Jefferson County, you don't have a lot of mining. And water, again, it's one of those things that goes back thousands of years. You had water, you used it for where you were using it. This notion of taking water, putting it in a bottle, and shipping it somewhere else is a somewhat recent phenomenon that I don't think the drafters of the Constitution and the state code really anticipated.
Any legal precedent in these types of cases you've been able to discover?
No, we haven't looked at that. No.
Might be interesting to know.
I suspect there is, but going back to water usage and water regulation, go back 1,000 years, it's always been on the quantity, and now we've introduced the quality as a major consideration as well.
Yes.
Now, when Sidewinder goes to the courts, are they going to address both quality and quantity issues? Or do you not?
I haven't seen what their legal arguments will be. I mean, that's just what the complaint is. They want to proceed. So that's really that's all that's been filed so far.
Now, will the who's the legal representative for the county? Is that Matt Harvey?
That's up to the planning commission.
Okay,
to
so
decide.
do they have a lawyer, or do you know?
Well, again, there is a sort of a, I don't want to call it a principle, but generally you hire a different attorney to defend you in court than the attorney who was giving you the advice, because you're basically defending that advice. So that sort of sets up a conflict there.
And he does act as the county attorney, his staff.
Right.
So that is correct, Bill. Let's go to Maria Lawrence in here too. Maria?
So what other hot and burning issues? Let's talk about microgrids. We haven't talked about that for a while.
No, I've been watching this all week, and I haven't heard a peep about microgrids, right? No,
Quiet.
Nothing.
Quiet.
Nothing.
Even in the next segment when Kara comes in with Mike Moot?
Yeah.
Did you listen yesterday by chance?
I did.
And the sharp contrast between the Berkeley County and Jefferson County?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I listened to the Senate testimony, and Mr. Gockenauer, had a very forceful view, and Pasha Maggi, who's the president of the Jefferson County Commission, had a more sort of conciliatory view, and I think where Mr. Gockenauer is coming from is. Obviously, Berkeley County has had and recruited a data center to go into the industrial site that's over by the hospice. The total site is around 300 acres. It's split 1/3 in Berkeley and 2/3 in Jefferson County, and they're obviously starting. They filed a plan. The company who owns it has filed a plan for 2 data center buildings and the necessary infrastructure for the Berkeley side. So it's already gone through the Berkeley Planning Commission for a concept plan. Again, it's still early in that process. But I think Berkeley County was like, well, we've landed this fish. And it's a pretty nice looking fish. And
$17 million fish.
that's a big fish. And I think Mr. Gockenauer feels like that the governor came along and said, well, that's a nice fish. I think I like that fish. It's my fish now.
We need a piece of that fish.
and well, initially,
We want the whole
the
fish.
state wanted the whole fish.
Yeah, that's right.
And so now Berkeley gets about 30% of that fish.
So what's your prediction then? Again, you made the reference that 30% in Berkeley County, 70 in Jefferson. How do you, knowing, of course we can ask them when they come on, what their thoughts are. Yeah.
I have asked the company.
And what's the response?
And they will be quite happy to share plans when they develop such plans. So,
Good point.
like a lot of real estate driven businesses, when you talk about like oil, business, like when they have landmen that go around and buying up mineral rights, they tend to operate under non-disclosures.
Sure.
Because they obviously, if people know that people are looking, and with that kind of money for that kind of property, the price goes up. If someone wants that, because these companies, the scale at which they operate and the money and resources that they have, I don't think we can really comprehend. 2 data center buildings, if they were to be built in Jefferson County, could exceed the entire property valuation of everything else in the county. So to give you a sense of the scale and why counties really, really like data centers. And when you look at Loudoun County, I mean, something like 80-90% of their budget is funded, from the property taxes that are generated by these data centers. They're you talk about in the food, energy dense, nutrition dense food. Well, data centers are tax dense, properties, because these buildings are essentially computers themselves of a type, with other computers inside of them, because with all the cooling and electronics and security and monitoring systems, they're not just a typical factory where you have a shell and then you put your equipment in there and it's mostly just, space. These are packed and dense, and they're designed for the needs of this equipment. So
Steve,
$2 billion would be a good ballpark for all in for a typical 100 megawatt data center, is what I hear.
Steve, a question was asked yesterday, and I don't know if any of us had a good answer to it. Someone pointed out there are two wires that need to go in, two cables, if you will. One is for the power source. Mm-hmm. The other one is from the data coming out. Now, the data coming out, would it be going to where, say in Berkeley County, an extension of that, where the cable coming out in southern West Virginia, where does that go to?
You're talking about the data?
The data center produces something. Where does it go after it produces something? Does it go by satellite to the cloud? Does it go by cable?
Okay, I see what you're asking. So just to take a step back, because this is history, and we like history here, and it's also funny. The way back, and this is going back, 30, 40 years ago, when the Pentagon was working with the telecom companies to set up these networks, and this was all copper at the time. Now it's all fiber. They set up these clusters. There was one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, and they named the one on the East Coast, which is out by Dulles Airport, May East, so they could name the one on the West Coast May West.
Marie almost did a spit take.
You should have told me that before I took a sip of my coffee.
That's why you don't drink it during an answer.
Metropolitan Area Exchange. But back when these were copper wires, and they were basically giant exchanges. But everybody wanted to be close to them, and that's how Loudoun County ended up with all these data centers. But now it's fiber, and it's a lot easier to lay fiber. And you see, if you see those orange poles every once in a while when you're on the roads, that's fiber under the ground somewhere. And please do not cut it because it's expensive and all that. One of the easy ways to get fiber around the country is along railroad rights of way. Because if you think about it, you got a nice continuous. And what does the property out in Carneysville have? It sits right by the CSX line.
Yeah, it does.
Right. So that's what we're seeing. That's why the constraint on these things are power. They need power, but they need that pipe, the data pipe, to get their product back out.
And the data pipe goes where? Still to these places, one on the East Coast?
It's a network. It is think of this, when you see those, those blood things where they light up your body and it's all these like little veins and whatnot. That's the way the internet is designed to work. It's this like mesh of network. So it goes from one hop to another hop to another hop. So it's not like one continuous pipe. It's more like a spider web of fiber connections. So as long as they can get to the nearest one, and then that can connect out to the world. Yeah.
Pasha Majdi yesterday, the Jefferson County Commission president, was pretty enthusiastic about this project. He said it's going to be the hugest economic development project in the state's history. I think is what he said at one point.
And that's what the governor is saying, and I think that's true. When you look at the scale of Loudoun County's budget, it's comparable to the state of West Virginia's, the entire state's budget.
Yeah.
And so, and they're building them at a very rapid clip. They're talking about they've got 100 data centers in the pipeline in Loudoun.
And with AI technology requiring so much power, you're going to have to keep building more of these things.
This is, if you think about, go back, 120 years ago when they first started building automobiles, people built them in their garages, and then Henry Ford came along and he built an entire city, the Rouge, to build these things. And, you had automobile factories all across the country, all around the world. This is data centers. This is what houses the modern internet, IT economy.
Now, we understand, at least we're told, that it'll be off the pole
in Berkeley County. That is what.
But the Jefferson County projections are of a larger scale. Will that also be able to go off the pole?
That is really a question for the power company, and that, because the two buildings that they have now there would pretty much, if they're coming off the pole, I can't imagine that there's a lot more capacity to power 3 or 4 more buildings. It's like the toaster. You can only plug, if you plug one toaster in to an outlet, if you plug 2, okay, that might work. But if you plug 6 toasters into the same outlet, that is not going to work. It's a lot of unknowns with what could happen on the Jefferson County side. There could be another, they could build a substation, upgrade the lines, take it off the grid. They could build a small plant, but that gets a lot more complicated. So it's really determined by what the company who's building it wants to do, because they were obviously starting before this microgrid bill. So I can't really, it would just be speculation at this point, but clearly there's enough room physically to build more data centers on the Jefferson County side of it.
But if there's not enough power in the grid off the poles, that means they'd have to build. They could well be building a power generating plant. I'm going to build it.
They could,
and it's located right beside hospice.
It could.
And one of the problems that Berkeley County has raised is that the county has no land use ordinance that would impact it. They can do anything they want to do without the county stepping in and said it violates our zoning code or our subdivision ordinance. So that meant that there could be, I'm not saying it will be, there could be a series of power generating plants in an area that you would not like a lot of excess noise.
Well, but the Berkeley site is, the concept plan that was filed shows the entirety of the 90 acres filled with 2 data center buildings and a switching yard to take the power off the pole. Yeah. Now, what could happen with the bill that was just passed, House Bill 2014, has this thing called microgrid districts, which are exempt, from local zoning once they're certified. So potentially that could be used to bypass the zoning in Jefferson to put a power generation facility over there. But again, there's one going into that. It's not going in. It's been announced over in Tucker County. It is a 500-acre site that plans to have a 1.6 gigawatt gas-fired power plant but also a diesel fired backup plant, because one of the things that Posh was talking about yesterday is they do need backup or redundant power. So if they can't get it off of 2 different grids, they're going to have diesel on site, some sort of generation. So all these things do take up space, and they're complicated. And more to the point, they slow down the development of the data centers, because now you're talking about building both data centers and power plants. So if they have their druthers, the data center companies would just rather plug in and worry about building the data centers. And that's why you're seeing this push to get more transmission into Loudoun. Now, one of the things that could happen is this transmission that's intended to go to Loudoun. They could build a substation in Berkeley or Jefferson and take power off of those big lines they're building and power data centers locally. Because one of the issues they're seeing over in Virginia is now that they've been talking about building these transmission lines, over the next few years, they're realizing the substations there are actually a little bit, they don't have any places to plug these wires in. So that's a holdup. So the whole thing is a very interconnected, complex thing about how do you get power to these data centers. And then you need water. Again, the newer systems are going to what they were saying, glycol. Yeah. But if you're generating power, you need water. So that's one of the concerns they have in Tucker County. 1.6 gigawatt power plant, which is about the size of Mount Storm, if you've ever been out there on Corridor H and you drive by it. And you see that big cloud coming at that steam. That's the water cooling those turbines. So the power generation needs water too. So a lot of inputs to drive these things. So they are not passive uses of the land. So it's a very, they look sort of clean and sleek on the outside, but they are very industrial.
Is there any possibility that in 20 years these things will be outmoded? Well, I just heard about a fusion breakthrough that they made today, where they were able to generate 22 minutes of power out of a fusion reaction, which is the baby steps of effectively moving to an entirely different way of generating energy.
Well, it is, but I do remember, back in college, and that was more than 20 minutes ago, and being really, entranced about fusion, power back then. And, so that's a technology that is always on the horizon. Closer in, we're talking about modular coal plants, which was raised up in the Senate debate, and small modular nuclear reactors. But again, those are still in prototypes. My understanding, there's 2 modular nuclear reactors in operation in the world. So this is 2030, 2035, 2040 before these technologies come online. So right now we're talking, it's off the grid, it's natural gas generation, solar maybe, but the problem with solar is these data centers operate 24/7. Solar does not operate 24/7. So you're really talking
but
a fossil.
batteries can provide that if you have adequate batteries.
That's a lot of batteries.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to have enough power, enough solar to charge the batteries, then enough solar to actually run the facility during the day while the other solar panels are charging the batteries, and enough batteries to run that facility at night. So it's basically you're multiplying it by 3x. You got 2 times the solar panels plus the battery just to fire these, and these are big. I mean, if like a megawatt. So if you had $1,000, okay, and that's 1 megawatt, or 100 megawatts. Let's put this another way. If your house is a dime, okay, the equivalent power of your house is a dime, 1 megawatt would be $1,000 to your house, to give you a sense of the scale of this. So each of these facilities is talking about 100 megawatts. So you're talking about 100,000 houses. 10,000. I mean, these are big numbers.
Which is the other interesting thing. I mean, we've been talking almost exclusively about this particular topic. I don't know that the community at large is talking about it quite as much, but you brought up the housing piece. So what's better? Couple data centers or 5 more housing developments?
Well, I think when you have Mike and Kara on next, I think what they'll say is it's a mix. I mean, that's communities work best when they have a good mix and they're not exclusive on one thing or another. And back to what Mario was asking about, will these things be obsolete? One of the things I heard Pasha talking about was, we could change our tax structure. We could move to an excess levy. Because the excess levy would stay under this bill. But that's at the whim of the state. So if the state decides to change the law and you've changed your tax structure, well, then you're high and dry. And you see this, like, if you go to the Midwest, 20, 30 years ago, it was a big problem. But their business was on steel and automotive manufacture, and that shifted. Some of that shifted overseas, some of it shifted down south. And you had entire communities that were decimated. Because they relied on a single industry. So a broad mix, residential, commercial, is what your local officials, that's the sweet spot.
Yeah, Rob, let me go back to the point you made a second ago about fusion. About 22 minutes been a baby step. That is a baby step, but how quickly things are going.
Yes.
I think it's about 6 months ago that they had 1 minute at Texas A&M. They did. So they'd gone from 1 minute up to 22 minutes in something like 6-7 months. So the research in this area is quite aggressive.
Maybe you remember the first electric cars were about a half an hour worth of battery.
Yeah.
That wasn't all that long ago. Right. Steve, you've got about a minute left. Final minute is yours, sir. When do you come out with the main edition next, and how do you sign up for it?
Well, we're at observerwv.com for the website, Observer WV News for our email newsletter, and we drop about 10,000 copies every other month around Jefferson County because and it's free because we just like to keep people informed, and we'll be following this issue. So and I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. We're taking to calling this the bill for unintended consequences.
That's a good one. But I'll tell you what, it's good to talk about issues as opposed to what commissioners are showing up at county commission meetings. The year has changed.
It has. This commission in Jefferson is a lot more productive, but it still has its own issues. Because it's buying buildings and it's taken on a couple big tasks over there itself.
Good to talk with you again,
All right.
Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
Steve Pearson from the West Virginia Independent Observer.